Good morning and welcome, fellow sovereigns. And this little talk promises to be a little bit longer, so break out the popcorn and the Coke and the ice creams and settle in. So there's a little bit to explain, and we're going to go back over 2,500 years today. So this talk is, let's say, sponsored by the current census that the New Zealand government would like all New Zealanders to complete by next Tuesday, I think it is. No, that's tomorrow. Anyway, I think it's Monday. And to date, I have come across 3 people who feel inclined to complete the census. They think they should. I have also come across at least 20 people who are not inclined to complete the census. So some of them are kind of battling with, should I do it or not? And some of them are just going, it's only a census, throw it in the rubbish. So there's a continuum of mindset about compliance, let's say. So I talked the other day briefly about the fact that we have moved from the Piscean age and now we're in the Aquarian age. So I'd like to just go back a little bit further. So the Piscean age, all ages, are basically around 2,500 years. The Mayan calendar has it at about 2,400 and something years. The Tibetan one is about 2,400 years. The Hopi one, they call it worlds, and going from one. So now we're going into the world, the heart world, according to the Hopis. So they're all around about that 2,400, 2,500 years. The Hindu one is also a little bit longer, I think, than the Tibetan one, but it's very, very similar. And so some people say that the change, if you like, from Piscean to Aquarian was on the 25th of July 1998. Other people are saying it was in 2012. But it's more like it's not like a cut-off, one thing to another. It's a phasing in. And because it's 2,500 years, it's not just like we all switch, boom, one to another. So Jesus kind of exemplified the Piscean age, and he's always symbolized by the fish. And the Piscean, the fish, is swimming. And before that was the Aryan age, which was the sheep. So Aries. And the sheep is bound by others' rules. So the sheep is always contained within someone else's fences or by a constantly vigilant shepherd and maybe his dog. So the sheep kind of paradigm, if you like, is constraints and rules. And asking an Aryan-minded person to explain rules is a little bit like asking a fish to explain water. So for an Aryan person, rules are so endemic, they are so elemental to their existence. It's almost like to them, there is no such thing as not rules. So there's no way for them to compare rules, because that's all there is. There's only rules, there's not other. And then we moved into the Piscean age, where rules became looser. So in the Old Testament, which was Aryan, there were 1,000, I don't know how many rules. And we had the 10 Commandments, and then if you look at the Old Testament, but the Bible, there's hundreds of rules. And apparently in the Hebrew, the Torah, there's thousands of rules, and they are still arguing about them to this day. We're talking several thousand years ago, and they're still arguing about the rules back then, and we're in today. So that's kind of the Aryan. Well, the acceptance of rules is Aryan, whereas the fish in the ocean, there are no boundaries. So the fish can go everywhere. There's no passports. There's no boundaries to cross. Sharks can go from one end in whales and whatever, one end of the continent of the world to the other. So the fish has no boundaries, and with every star sign there's like a particular conflict, shall we say. So for example, with Cancer, Cancers love their home. They love the family and the security and the stability and that coziness. The Dutch would call it gezellig, that home thing. But the Cancerians are the most ardent travellers as well. So Cancerians have this conflict of wanting a stable home, but also wanting to travel, wanting to go out, wanting to stay and wanting to go out. So that's the kind of conflict that Cancerians have. The conflict that the Pisceans have is about freedom. And a Piscean can explain to you all about freedom. Because for a Piscean there is freedom and there is not freedom. And so for the last 2,500 years, approx, we have pretty well argued all about rules. And where's the boundary? And this is my land, and this is your land, this is mine, this is yours. And so there's rules and boundaries, and we should do this, we shouldn't do this. And so Jesus came in after the Aryan era and kind of saw all these rules. And as a Piscean, he thought, let's soften them a bit, let's make them a bit more amenable, malleable to humans. And so he took the thousands of Hebrew, whatever number, I don't know how many there are, and distilled them down to 2. But he still had rules. Love yourself, love God. Or the other way around, wasn't it? Love God, love yourself. So he still had rules, but there was this constant battle. And then after Jesus' time, what happened? The church then started setting up all sorts of other rules. You must come to church every Sunday, and it must be in this building, and you must pay us this much, and you must. So Jesus kind of softened it, took it down to, distilled it to 2 kind of basic rules. And then, of course, and every religion has done that, whether it's Buddhism or Hinduism, or, we must wear these type of things, and we must grow our hair like this, and we must, rules. So it's like the Aryan, the Piscean has this constant conflict between having rules and not having rules. That's the conflict that Pisceans have. And so Pisceans can easily explain to you about freedom, because they know about freedom and they know about not freedom. And so we've had 2,500 years of fighting for freedom and fighting for rules. That's the Piscean conflict. And it's interesting that the group name, say for the Aryan, the sheep, there is a mob. And it's almost like it's one organism. The mob moves together. And I find it interesting that the Aboriginals insist on calling themselves a mob. They take an English word and call themselves a mob. And in a sense, that's going back to a very old mindset. And we have moved forward. And so FISH, the group name, is a school. And we have spent a lot of time trying to teach each other things. I think you are, you don't know much and I need to teach you. So we've spent our lifetimes trying to tell people things and trying to instruct, and it's all about schooling. And so that's the kind of FISH thing, that I assume that you are stupid, I assume that you're dumb, and I need to tell you things, I need to instruct you, rather than accepting that there is inner wisdom already, and I don't need to tell you. I just need to help you find your own inner wisdom. So that is the Socratic method. So Socrates was about 3,000 years ahead of his time. The Socratic method is basically saying, you know exactly what you need to know. So my role as a teacher is to help you find that wisdom within. And so that, in a sense, is the Aquarian energy, if you like, mindset. And it's interesting that the Aquarian does not have a group name, like mob or school or whatever, herd or whatever. There is simply the Aquarian. And the Aquarian kind of moves on their own, but they are absolutely connected with let's say, the globe, with humanity, with what's needed. And so we can look at whether it's the Australian fires, whether it's the Lismore floods, and it's getting increasingly a thing. Let's say that the authorities are stepping back, and in many ways authorities are getting in the way. So with the Napier flood just recently, the authorities are actually stopping people saving their houses and their animals and themselves. The police are getting in the way. And so what's happening is the Aquarian is just stepping in and giving their vehicle, giving their food, giving their aeroplanes, giving their medical knowledge and expertise. People are just stepping up and doing it. And there is no, oh, we must have a rule around this, who should come in here, who should come in there. People are just going in and doing what's needed. And that's the Aquarian, who doesn't have rules. Doesn't have, oh, we must do it this way, we can't have cars, we can only have utes or four-wheel drive. There's none of that. People are just stepping up. And everything they're doing basically, sounds judgmental, but it's basically appropriate. Because the rules are not set by some outside organisation, what's being done is absolutely appropriate. And that is how the Aquarian kind of works. So going back to the census, which sponsored this little talk, we can see a continuum, if you like. So there are people who are going, oh, I must fill this out. That's the Arian. Then there's people who are going, oh, I don't know if I should do this. Oh, what's the rules around this? What happens if I don't do it? Da 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 da. And so that's, if you like, the fish. It's like, what do I do in this? What's the rules? What's the not rules? Should I not? And then there's the other end of it, which is the Aquarian, which is, oh, a piece of paper came in the mail, it's the census, okay, and the rubbish. Not a thought. It's not a thing. A census almost does not exist. And I remember back in 2012, I think it was, for about 6 months, the Spanish government imploded. They couldn't agree, I don't know what happened. They just kind of stopped being a government, and they didn't meet for 6 months. They all went home. And suddenly, nothing happened. So there was this realization that we actually don't need government. We don't need rules. So that's, if you like, the Aquarian mindset is now growing. And so I had a little bit to do with the floods in Lismore and some other situations in Australia, and it's almost like the stepping up of individuals from Lismore to now in Hastings. This is not comparing New Zealanders and Australians, it's comparing timelines. So the time is, each time a disaster happens now, there is more involvement from people. They're not waiting and waiting and waiting, because in Lismore people waited a while because we were used to authorities stepping up and saying, you know, the SES and the police and the fire service and whatever would step up, and so people waited. Whereas with Napier, people haven't waited so long. They have just stepped in. So we're getting more and more used to a non-authority help. And people are just stepping in like instantly now. And so the more disasters in time, or situations that happen, people will start just stepping in. We will stop that moment of waiting for, oh, we need someone else to come in and provide the money, to provide the resources, to provide the whatever, the rules. We're just stepping in. And so that's the movement into the Aquarian age. And so at the moment there's a lot of people dissatisfied with government, with police, with all sorts of authorities, with medical system and whatever. And so the Piscean minded, if you like, are arguing about that. Rather than voting for this party or that party, we should vote for this party. But that's the Piscean, where we've still got a government. So rather than Bookmeister Fuller summed it up nicely when he said, if you want to change a system, and he's talking about both mechanical, physical things, or systems, economic systems, political systems. So basically he said that if you want to have something new, rather than fight the old or remodel the old or change the old, simply create something new that makes the old redundant. So if you've got a tractor and you want to turn it into a racing car, you can just remodel it, panel beat it and change the wheels and change the motor. And I mean, what a job. Buckmaster Fuller would say, leave the tractor and just go and build a racing car. So that's the kind of where we're going. And the Aquarian would say, it's almost like the Aquarian can't see government. The Aquarian can't see rules. And asking an Aquarian to explain freedom is almost like asking a dog to explain loyalty. It's so endemic, it's so elemental, like freedom is so elemental to an Aquarian, that there is no such thing as not freedom. And so it's very hard for an Aquarian to sort of get a grasp on what is this freedom, because it just is. It's just there. There's not freedom. And so it's almost like Aquarians are now stepping up and just getting in and doing what needs to be done. And it's a very, let's say, a natural, organic system, if you like, the Aquarian, that someone just steps up and does what's needed. And I keep doing this, I realise, and it's kind of from the heart. And the Aquarian, and it's anarchy. And so to a Piscean, anarchy is the worst thing out, because anarchy is something without rules, and we can't have anarchy because if we don't have rules, then everything's going to collapse. And the Pisceans think, and same with the Arians, even more so. But the Arians cannot conceive of not rules, so that it's just not a thing for an Arian, because rules just are there. And the world has already gone if there's no rules. But an Arian, no rules doesn't exist. It's kind of a mindset. However, anarchy is, if you like, the Aquarian way, where people just step up and do what they need to do. And everything is fulfilled. Every need is fulfilled in a natural, unstructured way. Because I remember when I was in Prague a few years ago, this guy was explaining how when the communists took over the Czech Republic, or Czechoslovakia, they can guarantee that 1 week in every month there'd be no toilet paper. It was just because everything was organised from Moscow. And so there is perhaps benefits in organisation, but you can't organise everything. There is just a limit to how we can organise stuff, and there's always going to be a breakdown. There's always going to be things missing. There's always going to be rules that need to be broken and changed. Whereas the Aquarian doesn't have rules. The Aquarian has a rule for this minute, and another rule for that minute, and another rule for that minute. It's the Aquarian just kind of what's needed in this minute, what's needed tomorrow, what's needed the next day. And so what's going to happen, and I feel like I'm not even predicting it, it's just, for me, it's happening. The collapse of all authorities is happening. And we know that the education system, I know, I've worked in the education system in England, in South Africa, in Australia and New Zealand, they are all collapsing. And every time someone tries to fix it, it gets worse. And worse and worse. And the same with the medical systems. They are falling apart. The government systems are all falling apart. The police systems are falling apart. There are so many police, I know, apparently in Australia, that are refusing to step up and enforce a lot of the rules that are going on, particularly in Victoria. And the same thing's happening here in New Zealand. And so every structure that we have is falling away. And that is terrifying to a Piscean, because we need some rules. We need to have, students we need to know where they are at 9 o'clock till 3 o'clock each day. But schooling has only been around for a couple of 100 years. Before that, we did not have schools. It was only the Industrial Revolution that created the need for schools, because we wanted children out of the way while their parents went off and worked off the farm and in the town. So we got rid of the children, and we looked after them, and we indoctrinated them, and we put them in nice rows, and they had to obey. And by the time they left school, they were used to being obeying and all that sort of Piscean stuff. So children left school nicely obedient. And that ain't happening now. And all these Piscean people are now really struggling with the idea that we're just not respecting doctors, we're not respecting lawyers, we're not respecting bank people, we're not respecting politicians, we're not respecting police. That's the old paradigm, because we used to respect those people, but we don't anymore. And that is what, it's just a natural occurrence, it's a natural progression, and we can't stop it. And whether we're looking at the Hindu timetable, or the Tibetan timetable, or the Hopi one, or the Mayan one, or the astrological one, or whatever one we look at, they are all saying the same thing. We're moving from X age to Y age, so to speak. And that is just what's happening. And so people will try and reconstruct the education system, or reconstruct the police system, or reconstruct the whatever. But they are all, I'm going to say they're going to fail. And it's not bad, it's just what needs to happen. And it's the same thing with species of animals becoming extinct. They've done their time here, they want to go. And we want to hold them back, we want to save this and that and the next thing. They want to go. Because apparently we're finding about 1,500 more species of plants and animals every year. So we're worrying about one species that just wants to go, like, we're done, we've had our evolution, we've learnt what we've learnt, and we've given what we've given, let us go. Because that is simply the natural flow of everything. Things come and go. And one of the species that's going is rules, and structures, and governments, and rulers. We're now coming back to ruling from here. This is government, the heart, or the gut, intuition, whatever. We're learning that we have wisdom within. So we don't need to go to schools, and we don't need to be in the schools, Piscean schooling. We're just open to wisdom from within and wisdom from nature. I told you it'd be a long one, and I could go on and on and on, and I think you've eaten all your popcorn, you've licked your ice cream clean, you've finished your Coke. It's probably time to go and have a coffee, is it? So, I just wish you the gentle observance of how things are going, to just look at what's falling away in your life. The things that used to be, and the things that are arising, because when things fall away, there's always something else. And so there are thousands on thousands now of individuals and organisations that are stepping up simply to give, with no thought of gain. So many non-profit organisations and non-profit non-organisations, just groups of people doing stuff to help. So government is being replaced. There is a new government, which is the government of the heart. And when we're doing the government of the heart, it's the wrong word, we automatically connect with what needs are out there, and we provide them. And so I bless you a gentle overview of what's going on, and an observation of whereabouts you are on that spectrum from Aries to Pisces to Aquarian, and where your friends and community and family are. And it's not about being right or wrong, it's just we kind of fit in to one or whatever, and we might be changing. You might have been a Piscean and now you're becoming less structured in your life, less regimented. So I wish you gentle observation of yourself and the world. And I bless you and all who sail in her.